On the mark, tribe, it's time to take a load off, get in a comfy chair, get in proper posture, and listen to Rob Ray as he helps us to reduce tension, just improve well-being by breathing. Rob, so good to have you on our show. How are you?
Thanks so much for having me on, Mark. I'm doing really, really well. It's a pleasure. I'm so glad you talked as well about posture. That's one of a key thing for breathing efficiently.
Well, I looked at you, and for the folks listening on audio, you can find this on YouTube. There's Rob, all handsome, sitting up nice and tall, and there's me looking like a turtle. And I was like, listen, I talk for a living. I need to be more upright to open up my airway as well. Um,
That's it.
okay, let's get to it. Let's introduce you before we get to breathing and just, something. I'm getting my cart before the horse. Breathing is necessary to life. Don't breathe, you don't live.
Quite right.
When you come out the womb, you slept, you start breathing, but no one really teaches you how to breathe properly. And it's the biggest skill
Absolutely.
we can develop. So, with that, tell us about you and the inspiration for doing what you do.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for the introduction, Mark. And that's absolutely it. And it's quite often I would say, it's the first thing we do when we arrive in this world, and it's the last thing we do when we leave this world. And yet we just kind of forget about the entirety of the in between. And it's really, really important. It's really important how we breathe, actually, the duration with which we breathe, the intensity with which we breathe, the duration, I suppose, with which we breathe. All of these things have such a massive impact on
Yeah.
our physiology. And physiology, of course, impacts psychology. So
Mm.
this is why it starts to become really, really interesting whenever we talk about performance, or whenever we talk about stress, or whenever we indeed talk about sleep. I came to breathwork actually, um, gosh, 12 or 13 years ago now on my honeymoon. Um,
Your honeymoon.
in in my honeymoon, indeed, yeah. Um, I did pranayama, which is known as the yogic science of breath and body.
Hmm.
Um, and initially, I just thought it was uh, yoga. Actually, I thought I was going to be doing downward dogs and maybe
Hmm.
some fun handstands, stuff like this. But the teacher made me just sit in utter silence and breathe in through my nose and hold gently and breathe out through my nose. And after 2 to 3 minutes, I started really noticing that my state had changed. And I went from, frustration initially, and kind of almost anger that I was being made to stay still, to something's happening. I don't know whether I'm feeling quite good, or I'm feeling there is something happening in my state.
Yeah.
Um, and that was the catalyst that brought me into the world of stillness, or the world of mindfulness or meditation,
Hmm.
which I find to be the most dynamic, creative space, and really allows us to understand how we are in our nervous system. And whenever we understand how we are in our nervous system, we start to, um, I suppose, grasp a better understanding how we or why we interact with others the way we do,
Hmm.
because we start to take a grasp of our triggers and our maybe deeper subconscious um, beliefs about ourselves, or feelings and thought systems that can absolutely affect the way that we think, feel, and act and speak.
Yeah. I, you know what? To me, I'm hearing you and I'm going, the first time, because I wasn't very well. And then I went to a doctor and they just put me on medicine and I started feeling worse. And then I
Mm,
saw another cardiologist and he looked at me and he goes, Mark, you travel weekly. He goes, you jacked up half the time because you're on the air. He goes, I know you're a spiritual guy. He goes, you need to take some time in the morning. You need to get outside.
mm,
You need to start breathing properly. And lo and behold, I'm I'm off all this medication and I'm going,
wow.
but here's the thing. And you said it was so appropriate when you said it because it hit me where you were like, I was kind of aggravated that
Yeah.
something as trite as breathing properly was what was being recommended to me. And I'm like, I'm above this. But the more
Mhm.
I've learned about it, the more I've realized that I had no real idea what I was doing and how much of life I was missing out on. And
Mhm.
how many times when I was stressed or under pressure or whatever, I had the tools to deal with it, and it was as simple as breathing properly.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. You know, the breath, I will often say, is the bridge between the subconscious and the conscious mind.
Hmm.
It is the bridge between our sympathetic and our parasympathetic state. And this is the autonomic nervous system we're talking about here.
Uh-huh.
Sympathetic is nothing to do with sympathy and everything to do with fight or flight. So a lot of times, if whenever you're about to stand up to make that 4 foot putt to win the match or to half the hole,
Uh-huh.
you're going to be actually in most probably fight or flight. There'll be an increase in respiratory rate. You'll start to breathe faster. You'll probably have sweaty palms. You'll probably feel a little bit scratchy under the armpit, and your breathing is actually quicker. That is telling. This is you in sympathetic state, and it is telling your nervous system, "I'm not safe."
Yeah.
So you're perceiving the world as not safe in this moment. This is going way back. This is the way we've evolved, right? So, we're talking about that feeling used to come from getting chased by predators, or whenever we were in wars, or things that were a lot more serious than a 4 foot putt, even though a 4 foot putt with your best mate can be a very, very serious business. Um, but your body hasn't really evolved to know the difference between running away from that tiger and making that 4 foot putt. So the fact that it's creating the same physiological change in your body whenever you're in that sympathetic state, cortisol is getting released, and it's a perpetual cycle. As you start to breathe faster, you're essentially telling your body, "Oh, I'm still in trouble. I'm still in trouble. I'm still in trouble." So how do we change that? How do we hack that? We start to breathe differently. We firstly catch it. We're aware. We say, "Oh my goodness, I'm kind of my breath is now
Yeah. Sure.
two in, two out, whatever it is." And I say, okay, take a deep breath has stood the test of time because it's such great advice for people to just actually just hang on, just slow down, take a breath, inhale through the nose and exhale long out through the mouth,
Yeah.
really, really slow it down. And then you're trying to use the breath to hack that little cycle that's going on and say, actually, I want to go from sympathetic to parasympathetic state. Parasympathetic state is the rest and digest.
Exactly.
With probably if you've had a massage, or if you've had a lovely braai, let's say on a Sunday
Right.
afternoon,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, you might be full afterwards, and you have that kind of lovely kind of woozy feeling where you might have a nap on the sofa.
Hmm.
Um, that that's very big indication of parasympathetic state.
Yeah.
And whenever we're in that state, we're able to make a putt much better. Because you're not perceiving threats everywhere you look. The hole doesn't look all of a sudden really small. It's still the same size, and you think, okay, I'm in a calm space and I can make a putt here.
Yeah. I You've got so many questions in my head right now, but I just want to keep this kind of personal because I think I'm talking on behalf of all the golfers listening to
Hmm.
this. Way back when I got into broadcast with CBS, I was fortunate that they connected me with a guy called Arthur Joseph, who was a
Okay.
vocal training coach. Now,
Wow.
I know you will know what the first thing the vocal training coach talked to me about, and that was my stature, and that was my breathing. And I'll never forget, he calls it a CLB because, everyone's like, take a deep breath. And I would be like, okay, and he's
Mm,
like, no, Mark. He goes, you got to allow this breath. He goes, let
hmm.
it feel like it sort of sinks into your soul. And then he goes, it's got to be almost a sensual experience. And I remember listening to him and then trying to allow this breath, but it just wasn't coming. And then all of a sudden, when I got to this place where I relaxed, I straightened myself up, and then I almost waited for the breath to happen. It was weird. And well, I'm going to tie a loop now because you made
Hmm.
one of your posts that struck a chord with me. And you go, you can hold your breath longer than you think,
Hmm.
because when a person starts holding their breath, panic sets in. So now I've got to breathe in and out, and I'm all basically panicked, even though I'm trying to take a breath. Now I'm all over the show, but are you feeling where I'm going here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think any time that you can find calm in the system in those stressful moments, it's practice, not only in the moment, but also neurons that fire together wire together. So as you start to do this on a regular basis, your body starts to learn the pathway that you're trying to show them. And so like you say about breath holding can be one of the greatest ways to induce relaxation and meditation.
Crazy, isn't it? Crazy.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And so many times, maybe it's the films that we want, maybe it's pop culture, maybe it's, people's impressions of whenever you're holding your breath and you're all tense, your head is, your face is becoming red. That the idea with a lot of breath holds, and certainly in Sanskrit, the pranayama literature, is breath holds are used as the gateway into meditation,
Okay.
sub-maximal breath holds. Now, I work with freedivers as well, and
Mhm.
it's definitely a lot more, let's say, aggressive training. However, what's a free diver trying to do whenever they're holding breath? They're trying to relax the whole body, as you say, because it's directly linked to the amount of oxygen they're going to use up in their system, if they are stressed or not stressed. And it becomes very, very important if you're 30 meters underwater,
No
as we can
kidding.
imagine, you
Yeah.
know. So if we can start to certainly use breath holds as a means to find calm in a stressful situation, then we can take that. It starts to transcend not just from breath, but into every single aspect of life. Whether you're standing up to do a talk, a big a speech, I would sometimes actually do, I'll maybe talk about the square box breathing you've maybe
Uh-huh.
seen before. Navy SEALs do it, in combat, and it's clinically verified, evidence-based, and proven to reduce excitability in the brain and in the body. So if you're on a stage, you can breathe in for 4 seconds through the nose. You can hold gently and breathe out for 4 seconds through the nose. And you can hold gently. 200 people could be looking at you, and they won't even know they won't even know.
You've hit the nail on the head there because when one first starts doing this, when one is new to learning to breathe properly, first off, the first thing that occurred to me was, all right, this is weird. Secondly, my goodness, I'm taking longer to complete one breath cycle.
There you go.
Thirdly,
Yeah.
I'm realizing that when I breathe out, I can feel my heart rate going down, and when I breathe in, it would go up, which I was
Yeah.
trying to do it the other way around, which wasn't working.
Yeah.
But then there's the sense of conspicuous going, okay, I'm just going to take a minute. And that minute just feels like this pregnant pause that's forever. And we live in this
Yeah.
culture where it's also busy. Instant this, instant that, you're playing golf. It's like panic is setting in because your round of golf is coming apart at the seams.
Yeah.
Yet you're taking a moment to go, let's breathe in,
Yeah.
breathe out, and things will start to settle down. Then your mind, everything will start to get back on track a bit better.
I think so. Sometimes things are as simple as take a breath in and take a breath out and take that pause. I sometimes use the example that breath work, mindfulness, meditation, and I sometimes group them together. Whilst they're not the same thing, for me, breath work is the gateway, as I've said, into those spaces. And
Yeah.
why are we doing it? From my point of view, we're doing it because if we imagine that we're up at the top of a ski slope, and um, an external stimulus happens to stress you out, you might be very well used to going down one little slope and one little piece that is just like, oh, something made me stressed. I go down there. Breath work, mindfulness, meditation, they give you that pause, that moment, not just to react and go down number one, but to respond and say, oh, number one is there, but I've never actually realized there's two, three, four, five, and six different slopes down this side. And maybe I don't have to do my reaction and go straight down number one. I can respond and choose to go number three. And I think it's very, very empowering and very, very liberating whenever we do that, because, as I said, just previously, the breath is that bridge between conscious and subconscious. So it's the language that the nervous system speaks. So we can't, let's say we're your level par, and you hook a ball into your drive off the tee, 14th tee, and you're in the trees. The 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 immediate thing that you'll do is maybe number one, get pretty annoyed at yourself,
Yeah.
agitated. Number
Mm.
two, you'll say, okay, don't stress, like you're grand, like we can maybe get up there, maybe the lie is going to be okay, maybe just punch out, but or you're starting to catastrophize, and whatever it is, you're speaking to yourself in a certain way, their self-talk, or negative self-talk. You'd be much better using that walk between the tee and the ball, breathing and using breath work out, because that's the language that the nervous system speaks to say, I don't want to be too stressed. I want to be down here. Not by saying, don't be stressed, don't be stressed, don't be stressed. We can't, talk
Yeah.
ourselves out of
Mhm.
anxiety. We just can't. There of course there are techniques you can use for positivity, but the breath is your best bang for the buck.
Well, look, I think unbeknownst to what you were doing there, you also leveled a course management insight when you talked about the different ski slopes.
Yeah.
Because when we're in trouble, say we've hooked our drive left of 14 and you're panicking, and I'm ruining my score and all of that stuff's going on. And
Mm-hmm.
because everything is staccato and stuff is moving fast, we pick like we've got to go this way as opposed to going, well, if I'm mindful enough, I'm breathing appropriately, my system is parasympathetic, I can go, you know what,
Mm-hmm.
I have other options that I can go out this way and still salvage a par four as opposed to trying to hit that
Absolutely.
hero shot because my mind is all over the map.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's about trying to keep ice in the mind and fire in the body. I mean,
Oh,
we've
look.
rugby players talk about this, golfers talk about this, tennis players that I've worked with talk about this. And how do we do that? Well, you do want fire in the body to an extent. That's the performance aspect. You want to have that aggression in the swing or in the shot or in the tackle. But of course, we want to be able to get up and make the correct decision from a space of calm, from a space of, if you think whenever you are in, if we're going back to this kind of sympathetic and parasympathetic state, you can only ever be in that flow state that sportsmen will talk about if you're in parasympathetic.
Okay,
Can't be in that sympathetic state. Have to be in that relaxed enough state where it feels like you're out of your own way. And
got
if
you.
you're out of your own way, then that's whenever you can kind of get into this flow. And I'm sure you've had rounds where you just feel like everything went right and you felt quite relaxed out there.
Hmm.
And that is, just by hook or by crook, maybe with the breath or without the breath, you've managed to stay in that state. That's a parasympathetic state you're experiencing. You'll maybe have had a massage before and wondered why whenever you're lying on your front, why your mouth is filling up with saliva. It's another trigger of the parasympathetic state,
Yeah.
and these are all tips that you could use on the 18th tee. Start to saliva, try to generate saliva in your mouth. It starts to tell your nervous system that, oh, I'm in parasympathetic. I'm actually okay. You know, these just little little ones.
You again have got my mind wandering, and I'm trying to get to questions here, but I just have to stay here. You talk about the environment and being like self-aware, but also aware of the outside. And I'll never forget when I was a college golfer. My college coach was a very wise man. He wasn't a very good golfer, and he had basically two rules. The one rule was when you were walking down the fairway and carrying your bag, you weren't allowed to look at the ground,
Mhm.
and so you had to look upward. And I was like, this is feeble. But when I got to this, I realized, hold on, I'm breathing easier. I'm seeing cooler stuff in the trees and my feet trudging along the ground because I'm five over. And then secondarily, I began to become aware, like I say to people all the time. I'm like, if you go to the Masters or something like that, one of those events where you get there and there's anticipation, I'm like, imagine what the competitors are feeling because they're
Mhm.
me and they are playing. I'm like, now I want you at the Open Championship or the Masters, listen for the birds.
Mhm.
And that's when you get to that place because you channel your mind elsewhere, and that's parasympathetic, yes? And
Absolutely.
you got to post to that. You're like, it's springtime. I'm going outside. I'm going to breathe in the sun. I'm going
Yeah.
to just enjoy the feeling of the sun on my skin, listen to the birds and stuff. And then lo and behold, I read something where it says, you know that birds only sing songs when there's no threat of danger.
Mhm.
And the human body is adapted to this too. So when you hear the bird song, your body will set
Peaceful.
that as well.
That's beautiful. I absolutely love that. One of the, I suppose, tools that I like to share with clients that I work with is one of you kind of touched on it whenever not to look downwards and to look up when you're walking down the fairway. Similar thing whenever they start to feel those physical sensations that they normally associate with anxiety or fear or threat. I ask them just to walk outside or at least walk to a window and
Mhm.
look up at the sky and do 3 breaths. And or 10 seconds, whichever one is longer.
Yeah.
Um, and it does, it's this perspective. It gives you, there's firstly, whenever you're walking forward and looking, this goes back again primordially. It's what you're making progress. You're scanning the horizon. You're keeping yourself open. This is very, very calming, soothing for the body. That's why people sometimes say, I had a walk in the park and it feels so much better. Of course, we're built to go and have this experience.
Okay, I feel like the Pied Piper of bringing breathing properly to golf, but all of the greats do it. I think unbeknownst to themselves, all the folks that don't.
Mm.
I guess the algorithm got me, but this little thing here I found online, and is apparently its version has been used by monks when they work
Wow,
breathing, right? So you breathe in through your nose and then you breathe out through this little tube, which is a necklace.
amazing.
So, okay, when I breathe in, I can breathe in for 4 seconds. I allow this
Hmm.
breath, like Arthur said, and then breathing out through the mouth, it takes a good 10 seconds, if not more, for me to empty myself.
Brilliant.
Then I watch my heart rate and it starts to just it
Yeah,
plummet. So
yeah.
it's amazing how you can, by, like you say, breathe in and then breathe out slowly and completely, how
Uh,
it just affects
it's
the system.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I think you alluded to it. It's just before the inhale speeds the heart up. The exhale actually inhibits that speed. So the inhale is associated with sympathetic, and the exhale is associated with your parasympathetic state. So, you know, by that definition, anytime you start to exhale for longer, you're slowing the heart down. Whenever you're slowing the heart down, we've already learned that if a lower respiratory rate corresponds with less stress or anxiety, because whenever you're more stressed, the respiratory rate increases. So again, just by doing that, you are communicating to your nervous system that it's okay, that it's all right. That, I mean, that the breath that you're talking about could be called as well flow breathing, and flow breathing would be, you can start at, say 3 seconds in and 6 seconds out.
Mhm.
And if that feels comfortable, you're 5 seconds in, seven out, six in, eight out, seven in, 10 out. Anywhere where you've got an extended exhale. One other thing I would add to that, and I do it particularly with my nieces and nephews, is humming, and or hissing. So
Really?
anyway, yeah, humming. There's a nerve or structure of nerves called the vagus nerve within the autonomic nervous system, and this vagus nerve is kind of a meandering nerve that goes all the way down from the brain down through the body and connects to nearly 90% of every single vital organ in your body.
Mhm.
And it's a branch of the parasympathetic state. So there's a lot of work and a lot of research into how we can stimulate the vagus nerve. And our body thankfully does it by itself whenever we're having a stress or a panic attack. It's trying to work for us. And people who are considered chronically anxious have a have an immobilization, let's say, in that vagus nerve. So how are certain ways to stimulate it? Humming is one of the best, because it vibrates. It vibrates, and that vibration in the body is calming you. It's very, very rare that you'll be, let's say, running away from that tiger back in the day and humming away, and humming a nice wee song to yourself. So, anytime that you can do that, you can just, as you say, allow the breath in 4 seconds, and then just a long It feels lovely, and you start to understand, where am I feeling the hum? Am I feeling it in my mouth? Am I feeling it in my chest? Can I move it down to my diaphragm? This is all connecting mind and body again. So as you say, you're taking your mind away from, uh, oh my goodness, I've wrecked my score, I've done this, it's blah 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 blah, and you're on that external world and that energy out here, and you're bringing it introspective. You're starting to tune into what's actually happening in the body. Where am I? What am I feeling? I'm calming myself through simple hum, and the hiss works the same way.
And you don't have to do this loud, folks. And I'm going to build on what Rob was saying there. Okay. You reminded me of this. A few weeks ago, we were on course, and I have two guys who work with me while I'm doing my on course announce job. And the one guy's name's Craig, and the other one's Tyler. And these are
Mhm.
young men who are like sons to me. And I'd read or had heard somewhere that if you hum, it's impossible to actually think of anything else.
I love it.
So I was like, I'm going to try this. So I hum and I'm like, and your mind cannot go elsewhere.
Yeah,
So I said this to the two of them, and lo and behold, for like 2, 3 holes, they're walking down the fairway on a PGA Tour event humming. And they're like, you're right. When we're doing that, it's like something happens with your mind and everything else just goes away when you
it
hum.
does. It does, and it's a, I walking down the golf course is it's a beautiful place to do it because you've got nature all around you, and as you say, you start to tune in the birds and the trees and everything. Um, Beautiful, I suppose, accumulative practice that one can build up to find that space in the nervous system whenever they're on the course is to do it as well in bed before you get up, just before with actually eyes closed, and even if you close your ears as well, and hearing, instead of kind of looking out and sensing everything else, you're just trying to feel it, and you're trying to feel where it is. And there's a theory and again evidence based and clinically backed school of thought around state dependent memory learning.
Okay.
And state dependent memory learning is all about trying to put yourself into those calm states in practice, let's say, and for 5 minutes every single morning during the week before you've got your big competition on a Saturday, to then walking down the fairway and finding that hum again in your body, and that state dependent memory goes, oh, I felt this calm feeling, and that's what he does on 7 a.m. every single morning for 4 minutes, 5 minutes. And this is where we start to connect everyday practice into a round of golf. And it's a cumulative, the more that you build this, let's say, space or dimension within yourself, the more you can access it whenever you are in times of stress. And the work here isn't about saying you're never going to get stressed on the golf course again. You're never going to get stressed at work again. You're never going. That's just not the way it is.
Yeah.
This is this is tools to handle, to know that stress is going to come up. It means that you're doing something important. You're
Mm-hmm.
only stressed because normally you're having a decent round, and you're. It means that something significant is happening. This is great. This is great news. However, what you want to do is say, during my round, it's very likely that I'll be put into stressful situations. However, I've got the tools, I've got the know-how to combat that and counteract that.
You in a post talked about going down a rabbit hole. Okay. And I feel like you've led me straight into this Warren right now because now I'm going back to Arthur and his book Vocal Leadership is on my desk. This is Arthur Joseph. And
Yes.
he said to me, he goes, Mark, it sound is just audio waves. He goes, they're just waves. And I saw a video one time where some guy had this big metal sort of drum and he'd hit it with a certain implement and all the sand on there would organize into a certain pattern.
Mm,
Hit it in a different place and the sand would organize into a different pattern. And so I looked into like audio healing and stuff like that. And it's
beautiful.
fascinating if you start doing that stuff, which corresponds with, to be able to hum properly, you have to breathe in appropriately and then you humming. We are almost creating the self-help, self-healing sort of an environment. And we're opening ourselves up to be okay in times when things aren't okay.
Exactly. This is just it. And I think sound plus breath is a powerful, powerful, powerful combination. And I've thankfully worked with some sound healers um, in that space where they call a lot of the instruments that they use teachers.
Yeah.
They're not instruments to them, they're teachers. And it's
Okay.
beautiful because each teacher has a different frequency.
Yeah.
And as you say, we vibrate at a certain frequency, and it's one of the most joyful things, actually, finding resonance with another human. Whenever I'm not a singer, I'm from the north of Ireland, Belfast boy who doesn't do much singing, unfortunately, and I would love to be able to sing.
Sound like Rory
I have.
McIlroy, by the
He actually doesn't live too far. We
way.
weren't brought up too far from each other. Um, However, whenever I do some breathwork workshops, and I sometimes ask them, maybe there's 25 in the room or 30 in the room, and I ask them to find their voice at a certain stage, not as simple as a hum, or it's more loud, it's like a louder, relaxed jaw. And people are always very reticent initially. It's a bit like, this is, no, this is not me. There's a moment of euphoria and joy and harmony whenever there's 30 people in a room who aren't professional singers by no means. Whenever there's a beautiful hum, and they're all coming in at different times because everyone's running out of breath at different times. So it's this kind of melody that goes through the room, and you can feel it. I can feel the energy in the room. It's healing. My wife comes and facilitates with me. We've got a baby due in 2 months, and I love that my baby is experiencing this vibration in my wife's body because of the sound.
Yes, and I'll quickly put a bow on this conversation to say when we're on the golf course, and on the golf course, things are going to go wrong more than they go right.
Yeah,
The only noise we're hearing is the negative self-talk we're feeding ourselves, as opposed to
yeah,
something that's uplifting and building and healing to
yes,
our central
yeah,
nervous system.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Couldn't agree more. And this is why I think it's number one of all this conversation is always awareness. Am I aware that I'm not either speaking to myself with this negative self-talk, or am I aware that my breath has become crazy? And then that's telling my system, you're in trouble. And then your thoughts get even more crazy because your body's even more crazy. So you've got fire in the body and fire in the head.
Yeah.
So if we're aware of that and we have the tools to say, I can do something about it, we use the tools, we create ice here and leave the fire there. Fire's a bit good.
All right. Few other things here because I want to get to a few breathing regimens. You've talked about the box breathing, the 4-4-4-4.
Mm,
I asked you about a statement you made where you said you can hold your breath longer than you think, and there's value in that. Then you
mm.
said hyperventilation can be good. If
Yeah,
anyone's ever read about Wim Hof, that's basically what he does.
it is.
And then you write something which I find fascinating. You say the less you breathe, the more oxygen is taken in.
Mhm.
I read a book by James Nestor called Breath. I don't know if you
Yeah,
right.
I know it.
And he talked about the 5-second breathing regimen. So it's like 5, 5, 5, and 5. So 5 in,
Mhm.
hold 5. And that is kind of like ideal for human development. And I'd never thought about that, but it is true. The slower we breathe, or the less we breathe, the more oxygen our body starts to take in and the more we fuel ourselves. But you can't be panting, I guess, is the caveat to all of this.
I think it's the caveat, and I think, once you start to get into the biomechanics and biochemistry of breath, um, you start to understand that the gas exchange that happens within the body is, I suppose, determined by the ratio or the balance and the relationship between oxygen and carbon dioxide.
Yeah, because the body is, you have said, and I love this, I've actually written it down, the body craves homeostasis.
That's exactly it.
Take us to school, explain to the folks who don't know what homeostasis is, and then talk about that principle, because I think you're going there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So the body is constantly trying to find, let's say, homeostasis or stasis is essentially equilibrium,
Yeah.
balance.
Mhm.
That's that where body is like pH, right down to our pH. That's essentially our body's fundamental objective and goal is to keep our pH in and around that middle number, and it uses uh, our rate of breath in order normally to try to keep that balanced.
Okay.
So if we start to breathe faster habitually, let's say if we're chronically anxious, or I quite often use the back of the envelope number as if you're breathing over 15 or 16 reps per minute. And a rep or a breath cycle is breathing in and out. If you're
Yeah.
breathing in and out over 15 or 16 times per minute, you're most likely described as a chronic hyperventilator.
Okay. Right.
Now, what does that mean, or why is it important? It's important because the more that we breathe out, or more that we breathe, let's say, the more carbon dioxide we are dispelling from our system.
Mm-hmm.
So the body then gets used to having less carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is not the devil whatsoever. That I kind of started with saying that oxygen and the relationship between oxygen and carbon dioxide is the key thing here to keep homeostasis. And why? Well, the hemoglobin, without trying to make this
Yeah.
too biology,
Mm-hmm.
hemoglobin, red blood cells travel around the body in, let's call it a treasure chest with a lock, and in the treasure chest is oxygen.
All right.
And let's use carbon dioxide as the key. So if we have enough keys, if we have enough carbon dioxide in the blood, then they will go along and they'll just open up the hemoglobin treasure chest. And that
Mhm.
oxygen is able then to come out and go into the cell, the tissue, the organ, the muscles, the brain, for you to be able to make better decisions on the golf course and the work with interpersonal relationships, with romantic relationships. And that is only achievable by breathing efficiently, by breathing functionally. Because if you're in that 15, 16 to 25 reps or breath cycles per minute, what's happening is that you've got hemoglobin going around your body and locked in a wee cage, and there's not enough carbon dioxide to say, oh, we can open that. So then the cell tissues and organs don't get the same level of oxygen, which gives us the foggy head, which makes us make worse decisions, which makes us actually feel more tired, because the muscles don't feel as nutrient dense
Yeah.
with the oxygen. So
Mhm.
if you can kind of see the cascade of detriment that starts to happen within the body, and this is all just through breathing in through the nose and breathing
I
out
would
through the
I would say golf score aside, okay, people, because look, we human beings who play golf, we're not golfers who happen to be human beings.
yeah.
I would say golf scores aside, the proper breathing will take care of a plethora of health issues. I mean, I'm
Oh,
thinking hypertension and such like that.
Oh, unbelievably so. You know, and the cascade goes on to sleep, and sleep is obviously such a pillar of health and well-being. So if we can if we can increase our breathing to the point that sleep becomes better quality, not just better length, but better quality,
Yeah.
then during that period, there's so much recovery that happens, and then you wake up and you're breathing better. You know, if you've ever had a late night, or really had a really bad night's sleep, you'll notice your heart rate and your is up, your
Yeah.
heart rate variability is
Mhm.
down, and your respiratory rate is up. Whenever you're sick, your respiratory rate is up. These are all, of course, these are telltale signs by wearable tech. And everything is so um, kind of zeitgeist now as well, because it gives us a little indicator of where our nervous system's at.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Okay. I feel like we haven't covered the entire gamut because there's so much more to it, but
It,
basically the common denominator is breathe appropriately.
mm,
And you will put yourself on the road to recovery and just panic management and such on the golf course. So you've talked about box breathing, 4 in, breathe out for 4, hold for 4 at the bottom of that, then breathe in again and such.
yeah,
Talk to me real fast before we go ahead. In my ice tub, I've been experimenting with breathe in, breathe out, then holding my breath for as long as I can after the out cycle.
okay. Yeah.
Hard.
It's no it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. It's known as Beloma in Sanskrit, or triangle breathing, or let's say low triangle. There's high triangle where you hold at the top of the inhale, and there's low triangle where you hold at the bottom of the
Yeah.
exhale. I suppose number one, I'm always wary not to do breath holds in water, even though it's a nice tub where
Right.
you're grand. I quite often I do say not to my. I'll tell you my protocol for ice bath particularly. If you think that whenever you get into ice, there's a shock response that happens,
Yes.
and that normally takes the form of an inspiratory gasp,
Yeah.
and then straight after that, what happens is you hyperventilate. Oh, yeah, that's cool.
Mhm.
And then the self-talk comes, and actually what's happening at this stage is that all your veins and capillaries are tightening, which is why you sometimes feel like you've got like pins and needles, or it's like if you try to straighten your fingers very quickly, it's sore. And that's because everything is just kind of constricted. Your blood goes directly to your vital organs to say, oh, we need to keep this person
Right.
safe.
Yeah. Mhm.
So I like to look at it as, okay, you meet your breath where it's at. You don't try to go from uh, oh flip, this is so cold, to big 6 second in and big 6 second out, because that's probably going to cause actually some more stress.
Okay.
But I actually say this right on the golf course, or with tennis players, or anyone that I'm speaking to. It's like just the awareness, number one, boom. Where is it? Oh, I'm one in, one out.
Mhm.
Oh, flip me. So then you just say, okay, I'm going to take control of being one in, one out, and I'm just going to do it with more deliberate. I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to find it, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to make it 2 in, 2 seconds in, and 2 seconds out. So it's going to and then I'm going to find 3 in and 3 out. So you kind of move from that very chronic hyperventilation, and you try, if you can get it that 5, fantastic. I think if you've got a lot of ice baths, great. Then you're probably at the stage where I would bring in some of those maybe more advanced breath works, particularly with breath holds, and particularly whenever I'm there with the person guiding them. I
Yeah.
don't mind doing breath holds because they're not by themselves. Um, but that's whenever it's really, really beautiful and interesting to start to use breath holds because, like we said, I think right at the top was that breath holds are such a beautiful way to induce relaxation. So I think if you're already familiar with how to use breath holds, let's say, and how to interact with breath holds and try to be the breath within, be the moment of stillness, and try to relax the body. And the other thing with the ice, I always say, people get in, their shoulders are up and they're clinging onto the side of the bath. And I'm like, just check what your hands are doing, just let them drop. Check what the shoulders are doing, let them drop. Look into my eyes and breathe in for 2 and breathe out for 2.
Yeah.
Just find that calm in the body. And again, we're going back to, there's ice in the head and fire in the body,
Yeah.
even though you're in underwater in the ice.
Hey, to that, I, you were talking about the carbon dioxide and
Hmm.
chronic overbreathers, it's actually bad for one. The breath hold at the bottom when you breathe out, that I'm going to get the vernacular wrong. That stimulates carbon dioxide or the little keys for the hemoglobin treasure chest inside of the body. Am I right?
Absolutely, yeah. So I suppose you can think about it that any time that you hold your breath, you're replenishing your carbon dioxide levels.
Okay.
So if we can start to, and this is where it's really, really interesting actually doing breathing technique, because I think you alluded to it as we talked earlier about box breathing. And if it's 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold, um, what actually that's a 16-second breath cycle. So what is actually happening there is that you're kind of doing like 3.5 breaths per minute.
Exactly.
If you start doing that with someone who's used to doing 18 breath cycles per minute, you're completely changing their life just in the moment, and therefore what happens is that person, if they do that 3 to 5 minutes every day, their body, you have what are called chemoreceptors, and they're just the back of the neck here. And these chemoreceptors literally act as like a thermostat central heating system. And they act as thermostats in the body to say, oh, we've realized that carbon dioxide is low. We need to breathe we need to breathe slower in order to replenish it, or we need to that's why people sometimes have this apnea. They call it email apnea whenever they get something, they hold their breath and they don't even realize. But these chemoreceptors, they're malleable and they're sensitive, so we can change them. So anytime that we're starting to do like a brilliant, like simple breathing, box breathing exercise, 4 in, 4 out, 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold, we are starting to train the chemoreceptors to say we actually don't mind more carbon dioxide in the body. You don't need to trigger something to say breathe faster again. We if the more that we can get used to having more carbon dioxide in the body, the better our tolerance is to carbon dioxide, the
Yeah.
better then the oxygen releases to the blood cells,
Sensational.
tissues.
Fantastic. And there's just so much to it, but the truth is, it's just good for anybody in any stage of their life at any stage of the game. So you said practice 3 to 5 minutes a day. Is that
Yeah.
somebody?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes, start off if you've never done any sort of breath work techniques or exercises before, start off with 10 breaths a day,
All
like
right.
10 conscious breaths where you're starting to take control of how you're breathing is a beautiful, beautiful start. And I kind of, I use my brother as an example a lot actually, because, um, he's a guy who does shift work, has 5 kids, and doesn't have the 2 hours in the morning like I might to do lots of beautiful meditation, mindfulness, and breathwork exercise. So try to look at it not as a breathing practice that you have to do for 45 minutes straight. You can just implement little breathing moments or breathing breaks through the day where I do this. If I've got 3 Zooms in a row. before the one Zoom finishes and before the next one starts, I'll sit straight, fine as we alluded to earlier, a bit of posture, and just close my eyes and just breathe and try to see where's my breath. Can I start to fill my abdomen? And why are we breathing deeply into the abdomen? Because there's more of these little alveoli, the little air sacs down at the bottom of the lungs. That's why a lot of people say that breathing deeply in your diaphragm, diaphragmatic breathing, is just so powerful as an initial start. And breathing horizontally, so starting to feel that the breath is going this, kind of out the sides rather than up and down. This beautiful practice to start to tune in all these little tips. They're tips because they help you connect to the parasympathetic state that we've mentioned so many times now, which just allows calm and relaxation and regeneration. When the body's calm, it starts to regenerate. It speaks to your point about the health benefit, quite aside from the stress and anxiety. And there's huge health benefits. And stress and anxiety do cause dis-ease, it's tension in your body, it's inflammation. If your body's continually inflamed, it never actually finishes the loop to say, oh, I've recovered now. So the more tension we can release or move in our body, the better. And we can do that through, as you say, going for a walk on a golf course, perfect if you're looking up,
Mhm.
doing breath work. We can do it by doing movement. We can do it by, kindness just to ourselves and compassion to ourselves. These are these are these should be just like normal things, and yet a lot of people, we can't do that for ourselves.
Rob, I love you, but compassion towards oneself on the golf course when it's not going right is very hard.
It's very hard.
I've got to, okay, you've been so great with your time and everything you've said. People can go to your social to go and find more like 4-7-8 breathing regimens and such. I
Yes,
do want to ask you though, nose breathing versus mouth breathing, because this I feel like is almost the cornerstone of the whole thing.
I think so. And whenever we're talking about golf, whenever we're talking about efficient breathing, breathing for longevity, um, I'm a massive advocate of nasal breathing. I use uh, the anagram of NGSE. It looks like nose, capital N, capital G, capital S, capital E, and it's nasal, gentle, slow, and expansive. And this is the I would love, your listeners to take away just a simple NGSE, um, to think about breathing, because if I give any sort of advice to people before I've even met them, it's always nasal breathing, and it's always gentle, and it's always slow, and it's always expansive. There is a place for mouth breathing, and I use it within my exercises. You alluded to it earlier with the kind of Wim Hof stuff. Mouth breathing, let biochemically and mechanically just getting air in through the mouth and air out through the mouth takes out the nose as a resistor. The nose, we breathe through the nose because it's got all these wee hairs as well, and then it humidifies the air, it cleans the air. It actually, because of the resistance, it makes us breathe deeper into the diaphragm. So you've got to kind of use a little bit more force, which helps us kind of fill the lungs.
Yeah.
Whenever we're doing mouth breathing, from my point of view, it's for a very specific objective. And I use the example that if you go to the gym and you squat, or you squat eight reps across the gym with your two dumbbells in your hand, and you stand up and you rest, and then you squat 8 reps and whatever, and you do your 3 sets, then you walk to the gym. You walk out. I'm in London at the minute. You don't squat down the road.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
definitely not. You're gonna look silly, and you're gonna get really really sore thighs and legs
Mhm.
for the rest of the day. I use that as an example with mouth breathing. I don't want you to. But yes, for a specific breathing protocol or technique in very voluntary, short, short bursts, probably up to about 30 to 40 minutes would be the most I would ever do with mouth breathing with people. Um, we use that as a, I suppose, a gateway into a different type of breath work and a different state of consciousness.
Gotcha.
And that's like a transformational breath work that I also teach. And I think on the spiritual level and on the well-being and health healing level, it's powerful. And I work with a lot of clients simply on that journey of self-discovery and self-connection. However, I don't use it really as any part of my performance breath work with athletes and singers and politicians. Where I would use it is maybe in a type of cyclic hyperventilation, like a Wim Hof like, or certainly in science speak it's hyperventilation, but only for 5 minutes, where you go in, out. And the school of thought behind that is hormesis and hormetic stress. Hormetic stress is whenever we voluntarily expose ourselves to stress in order to create adaptation within the within the physiology. So it's exactly the same as your ice bath. That's why you're doing it. Of course, yeah, exactly. So, yes, if I wouldn't be a breathwork coach, I don't think, worth my salt if I didn't make that differentiation between nasal and mouth breathing. But that's not to say that mouth breathing should never be done. I would also say that functional breathing and efficient breathing is, I suppose, it to meet the current state of metabolic demand. And I mean that by saying, if you're running a marathon, ideally we want to start with nasal breathing. But at some stage, as you start to really,
As you
really
start
push,
breathing out of your mouth. No, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And if you're really, really blowing a gasket, the way you're breathing is meeting the current state of metabolic demand. So in and out through the mouth isn't the end of the world. It's absolutely, it's efficient actually at that stage, because you're trying to get oxygen in and you're trying to get carbon dioxide out, and it has to be pretty quick. It's not efficient if you're sitting watching Netflix. If you're just sitting on a sofa and you're like,
Yeah.
it's not efficient. Now, like I say, that transformational breath is a total different kettle of fish, and I love that journey with out breathing for
Sensational stuff. I've kept you for so long. Thank you.
that.
I guess it's the perfect segue to say, how do people find Rob Ray? I know you give Zoom outings, but I'm sure people would want to hook up with you. So what's the website? What's the social media? What's the contact details, please?
Oh, thanks, buddy. Yeah, my website is www.robray.co.uk. And again, the Ray is spelled REA. So it's always a confusing one. My Instagram, which is pretty much where you'll see quite a lot of my stuff, is at Rob Ray underscore underscore. And that's the way to get me mostly.
I'll start with it, folks. Breath is life. I'll end with this. Breath is life. And I'm glad and thankful that you would come and join us and help us through this very important journey, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been real pleasure to chat, and hope to do it again sometime, my friend.